And a record number of China aircraft enter Taiwan's air defense zone. The island is on high alert, raising concerns around the region. And for a closer look into this story, Ross Feingold, Director of Business Development at SafePro Group, joins us. Ross, what point is China trying to make with these incursions?
Well, that's a great question because it's not clear. Is it 100% directed at Taiwan, or is it also in part directed towards the United States, or to a lesser extent Japan, as well as maybe Australia, which has been talking about enhanced defense ties? Obviously, the AUKUS agreement with the UK and the United States is a factor there as well. But for the most part, it is directed at Taiwan, and it's directed at the government here in Taipei, which, as we know, for 5 years, has refused to agree to how China wants to frame the relationship between Taiwan and China.
So, Ross, if it were a signal to Taiwan's supporters, what signal is Beijing sending to them?
It's a test. It's a test to see what kind of response not only will the Taiwan civilian authorities have, but as well as the military, and then to a lesser extent, a test of, again, those same countries that we just mentioned, primarily the United States, as well as Japan and Australia. The United States government in the past hours or days, they've issued statements, but we've yet to see substantive action. And frankly, I think we're going to see some critics of the Biden administration say, it's not enough for the State Department spokesman or the White House spokeswoman to make a statement from the podium or to send out a tweet. So that's definitely something to watch for, is whether or not the United States is going to hope that this just ends, or the United States is actually going to take some substantive action to show some support for Taiwan. So from the Chinese leadership's perspective, they felt that the timing was right to throw down this test on the Biden administration again, as well as the government here in Taipei.
And speaking of the government in Taipei, how do you think they're going to likely to respond to these activities?
Well, one interesting thing about their response so far is, again, we've seen a lot of statements. So in a way that's kind of similar to what we see from the United States. So we see press releases, we see tweets, not just in Mandarin, but also in English from the government here in Taipei. We see them doing foreign media or international media interviews. Ing-wen has a commentary published in a US-based publication that was recently out in the previous few hours. So there's a public relations aspect to their response. What we have not seen yet is a significant military response, other than what Taiwan usually does, which is to scramble its own fighters and to have those pilots announce to the Chinese pilots that you're getting too close, and then share those recordings with the media to get some domestic PR value out of that exercise as well.
Meantime, Ross, Taiwan is moving to boost its defense spending to the tune of some $9 billion, but it isn't any match for the resources and firepower of the People's Liberation Army, is it?
Yeah, it's a fair point, and critics have made this point abundantly clear to the government of Taiwan, but there's domestic political considerations here in Taiwan as well. The public has expectations for government spending in other areas besides the military, social spending, healthcare. Obviously, there's COVID-19 issues. The government has had several relief packages for business as well as the general public as well. So from a defense perspective, from the perspective of defense analysts, they would like the Taiwan government to spend substantially more, however one wants to measure it, whichever metric one prefers to use, such as a percentage of the government budget, percentage of GDP, et cetera. But they're not there. Yes, they're increasing year on year, but actually the increases are fairly modest. And as we know, China continues to invest substantially more in improving its own military capabilities. And unless Taiwan invests substantially more for its own capabilities, then that gap with China will continue to grow.
All right, Ross, thanks very much for your perspectives this evening. Ross Feingold from SafePro Group.